I'm Janet Childs of the Education Committee of Universal Church of the Master, and it's with great pleasure and honor that I welcome you to tonight's presentation, Transmutation, Personal, Community, and World. And I am so excited to be co-presenting with my amazing Reverend Dr. Mary Garry, who actually was the brainchild of this whole concept. And we are so grateful and so glad that each and every one of you is here, and each and every one of you hopefully will participate, and we will share in this wonderful cumulative wisdom circle as we gather together to talk about the various dynamics that go with transmutation. So we're still admitting folks, so I'm just going to say we're admitting folks, and so we invite them to come on in. Come on in. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, Bob.
Wonderful. Hey, Bob. Hey, Lynn. How are you? Wonderful. We are so glad to welcome each and every one of you. And I'd like to invite, as we are, yay, there you are, invite you to take a nice big stretch and a nice big deep breath. I don't know how many of you may have been on Zoom all day or been busy doing things, but just take a nice deep breath. And just allow yourself to get settled in your chair, into your safe place for this evening's presentation. And we have a PowerPoint which we will be periodically sharing, but we want to create the space too for all of you to see each other. So I am going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint. Is that okay, Mare?
Sure.
And there's a way, my friends, that you can view the PowerPoint, okay, and also be able to view the participants. If you put it in a grid view, you will be able to see the PowerPoint and the participants.
Is there a trick to the grid, Janet?
Yes, hit on the grid on that 9 dot thing on the right corner, and it will let you see more folks. Welcome, Mr. Christopher, Reverend Christopher. I'm so glad you came.
Lynn should be along shortly if she's not already here.
I believe she's already here. I think
Okay,
I saw her come on. Yes.
Sorry I'm late.
No worries. We welcome you. And I owe you an apology. In our education report, I made a typo error and neglected to put you on Twin Souls. And you were amazing at our February presentation. So I apologize. Please accept my apology.
Oh, I do. I had forgotten about that. Thanks for all the good work you guys are doing.
Oh,
Mary, you too. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Janet, shall we start?
Yes, I believe we should start and welcome people to the table.
Okay. Good. Are you going to start in your usual manner of bringing light into us?
Absolutely.
Good.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen. All right. So we have an incredible candle here, and it's a heart, and it's tied with a gold ribbon, and just felt like we needed blue today, and we needed the heart because we'll be opening our hearts and opening the wonderful space for the light. And I am going to light this candle as a symbol of our light that we can be for each other. The light of support, the light of wisdom, the light of compassion, and the light of understanding. And we
as
invite
well
you.
as, I think, the light of divine. I think we want to bring the forces, the energies of the divine into this meeting, because it doesn't matter to us what you call the divine, or if you call it an energy, or you call it a person, or you have a prophet that you're accustomed to. None of that really matters. What we believe and what we hope will be supported as we work on transmutation is understanding we're not doing it alone. We're doing it with the powerful forces of light that Janet always brings in, and how challenging that has been lately, as we have had to deal with so many divergent issues that each one in the place of its focus is incredible, and in the place of observing it is pretty powerful also. So we're looking to come together. It's exciting to see the people who've joined us, to have that energy refreshed and stabilized and lightened. And so that's part of the actuality of what we want to accomplish today, as well as sharing some just general information that you can take away and tuck away. We need to have a password, huh, Janet? But what do they say on television? Back to you, Janet.
Back to me, Janet. All right. So I'm going to put down the candle because I can be very clumsy. But if we ever need to see it, my friends, just let me know. All right. So hold on. Having a little bit of difficulty. There we go. So we are in 360 grief, my friends. And this is something that we've talked about in our different communities for a while. But we just want to acknowledge it because it can be incredibly difficult, okay, to deal with all that we are dealing with. Natural disasters, climate change, human disasters, COVID-19 as it unfolds and continues to surprise us, racial equity and justice, financial security. All of these issues are things that we deal with. And most importantly, as Mary was talking about, how we can bring about transmutation as we deal with 360 grief. But we want to acknowledge that every area of our life is impacted. And when we acknowledge the magnitude, and when we share with each other, we can create a process called tending and befriending, where actually together we hold the energy of all of this by acknowledging it and sharing it. And we can actually begin the transmutation process. So this is very powerful, my friends, as we go forward into exploring these topics, how we can do this for ourselves in our own lives and for our own community and for our own world, but also realizing that we can do that for and with each other. And there's our candle. We've called the term, it's been commonly called in COVID-19 times, social distancing. We want to invite you to change that concept to physical distancing for your health and mine. And what that means is that physically we do need to remain distant in some ways because of the virus and the variants. However, we do not need to socially distance. And so we are so pleased and happy that each and every one of you have come into this meeting to be a part of this powerful moment, this powerful evening, where we are taking a couple of hours of our day to be out and really say, when I hug me, I hug you. So I'm just going to invite you, everyone, give yourself a hug. And we're going to be like giving it to each other. Okay? Give yourself a hug. And feel the physical sensation of hugging and being hugged, of hugging and being hugged. This is so powerful. Let that sensation fill your body. Let it ground you into this reality that we can connect in a social way and we can connect with love, even though we may have to be physically distanced for now. So just breathe in that hug. Let yourself feel it from the bottom of your toes to the tip of your head. Because we not only long to be hugged, we long to hug. So that gives us that physical sensation. Back to you, Mary.
One of the things we thought both Janet and I have touched in with some programs, and certainly if you have turned your television on at all, there are programs that talk about September 11th. And I thought it might be helpful, just in a framing way, if we spoke for just a couple of minutes about what we remembered about that day. I remember that Tom and I were sitting in our kitchen, in our home, and the phone rang, and it was our friend Nancy Witt. Some of you may know Nancy Witt, but she said, "Gotta hurry, turn on your television right now." Click. And I thought, whoa, she's never done that before in all of our many years of friendship. We turned on the television just in time to see the second plane going into the tower, the second tower. And by then, the people who saw the first plane and had been with the experience from the first plane initially weren't sure if it was an attack or a mistake, or someone had made an error. But by the second plane, we knew that it was not an error; it was an attack. And we spent a lot of time in front of the television that day. And as is my style, I guess my personal style, I got angrier and angrier. And Tom, who's my husband, I think most people know Tom, became more and more centered, patient, healing. And then we decided we would open our home. So we just sent out a note to everybody that said if they wanted to come tonight at 6:30 or what, I don't even remember what time it was, into our living room, we would pray together and for the response to the bombing of the World Trade Center. That's all we knew at the time. And one of the reasons that I chose to show it and chose to go first is that my reaction was not Tom's reaction. My reaction was not that of a minister, a spiritual minister, which I already was at the time, but it became pretty primal for me. And, I would cheerfully have joined the CIA or some other group that, I was prepared to hit back. And Tom said to me, we may need to hit back, but we don't know that and we don't need to do it now. I'd like you to think, Mary, about people who were pretty successful in life, who went into their normal day's work at the tower building, up to the high levels. The higher you are in those kind of buildings, usually the more money you're making them, at least the more you're prepared to pay in your rent. And they went to work and all was well in their wonderful life. And at this point, they're holding hands with a stranger and jumping from incredible heights so that they won't be burned alive. And he said, I think the work we're going to have to do is the work for those people. We all know metaphysics enough to know that those people obviously transitioned immediately, but how complicated was it? How quickly were they to know to turn to the light? That we, Tom, certainly realized that the people from the other side, spirits from the other side, usually they call on people from your own galaxy or whatever to come in. So those people came in, but they had to get the attention, and the attention was still focused on the earth. So we chose to work, and then the people that came to our home after we did prayers and discussions and work, we worked to turn those people towards the light so that they would be free to move on after such a horrendous, unplanned experience. And I shared mine first because I think it's good to know that even ministers, even spiritual people can have a moment when they don't respond at the highest level that they wish they could have responded at. And so ultimately, I said the right things. I prayed the right prayers. We sent the right people, which were all of them, into the light. But I had to work through my own physical energy, my own frustration, my own anger at the fact that someone had dared to attack our country. So I'm very interested in what other people remember about that day for themselves.
And I'm probably going to share last, so I encourage some of you to please share your experiences.
And you can do the little clicks if people want to. Corky, I'll bet.
Would anyone like to share?
What?
We're getting an echo. Did you want to share, Corky?
Was that you, Corky, echoing? Chris?
You have to remember to press the mute, undo the mute button if you want to share.
That's right. So, Mr. Eric, would you like to share?
Well, I don't have a lot to say. I found myself, I was very much anti-war until then, and I got a little bit more pro-war after that, at least until I saw how it was being waged and how it was being extended. Then I was anti-war again. That's about all I have to say.
I'm so glad you made it tonight, Eric, and I'm glad I could invite you to share with us.
Thanks.
And you know, Eric, I just want to honor that in some ways you're sharing that along with Mary's sharing. That is a beautiful example of how an event like this can totally turn us, upside down and gathering a new perspective and a new perception. So thank you for that. That actually is a lot to share.
Hey, this is Ala. My camera is not working. Sorry about that. But I do remember working with my 6 months old baby who is, 20 now. And the streets were all of a sudden really quiet. And I didn't really, I was consumed with the baby, taking care of whatever it was. And my friend called me and told me to go turn on the TV. And it was what she told me was just like, that's unbelievable. And I think from the safety of knowing, just thinking about raising my kids, there's a whole different look on the world at that day.
Was it frightening?
Yeah, yes, very much so, of course.
And having an infant, having a baby, or a young child, I mean, I don't know how it was for you, Ala, but I know whenever I've been in the care of a little child, I am extra protective, and extra scared.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, it was my birthday. My father usually would greet me when we spoke, even though he'd been through World War II and had helped direct the Interior Department. He was so so riveted and so shaken by this. And that came through to me after all of his years in public life, the impact of this on him. That was my experience.
It's logic sometimes. I don't know about your father, but I was thinking back to my own experiences in the family. My daughter called her husband and said, go get our son out of school so we have him safe. And he said, well, I could do that if you want me to do that, honey, but my sense of what's happening is that first it was the World Trade Center, and then it was, so we probably are all right to leave them. And, you know, we like, or primarily, what you think about is who is close to you and are they safe? And I think that's one of the challenges.
Absolutely. And happy birthday, Lynn, because it is your birthday. You know, 9/11, 9/11 is your birthday, and we honor your birthday in the midst. And having your birthday on 9/11 has probably totally changed. Well, how has it been for you having your birthday on 9/11?
Looks like she's frozen. I'm not sure she's there, Lynn. Okay. As far as my reaction, my first impressions on this were that this could be the beginning of the, you know, the Third World War, the initiation. The first thing of the plane flying into the tower was one thing. When the second one hit, it was obvious. Had some friends that called me and just said to beware. They were getting a lot of the side chatter of things, calls to the Air Force and actions that were being put in place. This could have been the end of the world as we knew it. If it did go nuclear, who was in charge of the reactions, how they do it. I think in the long run, it's better that we had somebody that seemed a bit stunned and dazed by the action. I'm glad that there was some time taken before they did try any retaliatory actions. And yet I am very disappointed with their actions along the way. I'm not a warmonger, but I am very much aware that we do need to have defenses. My father being in World War II, a lot of one of my best friends was from the Greatest Generation, a medic on Normandy Beach. War is not a pretty thing. And this has been a different type of warfare. And it is very disappointing to see it end so badly for the societies in Afghanistan are worse off now than they were before. And it's a big time of transition for them. I think we need to pray a lot for the people of Afghanistan and the surrounding areas. The tensions on this planet were bad enough with just COVID, let alone throwing these experiences that were with 9/11 in Afghanistan, ending our war the way that it did. I wish we had some of those resources, the airplanes and the helicopters to use here in California to fight the fires. And with that, I am very concerned about and I think we need to pray a lot for the women, the children, the people, the populations of Afghanistan. And I'm not sure that the root causes of the problem were resolved any better in Afghanistan than they were in World War II at the ending of World War II, dealing with the Germans in that. The impact upon the people subjected to the terror of war, warfare, and weaponry is not a good thing. So for me, there was some fear of it being the end and being prepared, hunkering down, get your food supplies. Can you survive the first days or weeks? And we did not go there, and I hope we never go there.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you. It looks like Lynn's back now.
And also,
I'm on all the time. Sometimes I'm just on mute, waiting for people to pick some things up here. But I'm listening to everything.
Wonderful. Donna, you have your hand up. Donna Christensen.
Right, I know, and I'm just going in the house and the dogs are barking madly. So I remember that morning because I was in bed and the alarm had gone off and I was listening to KDFC, which is a classical music station, and they never give the news,
Right.
but they broke into their music to say that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And I'm lying in bed thinking, that is so odd that they would interrupt their music to say that. So I got up and I turned on TV just as the second plane hit the tower. And I think the rest of the day I was just in shock. So I don't remember very much of that day, except I was glued to the TV set and talking to my relatives back east, and just horrified by the events of that day, and very much connected to what was going on. So, and I'm still, every year I'm mindful of that day.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we're asking to share stories about.
I don't know why I can't hear better. I'm going to go on my computer and hoping that I can hear better.
Wonderful.
Okay, Donna, I think that was my fault. I think I somehow muted
that's all I
myself.
had to say.
I was acknowledging what an incredible day it was, and we probably watched more television in that one day, going from channel to channel, hoping that somebody would have something better to say. So, Dottie? Dottie, I was hoping you might have something you wanted to share with us.
And
Is
while
Bob Hostetter still here? I thought he was here.
Dottie, are you on mute?
Yes, he is still here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Dottie, can you hear Dottie?
Can you hear me when I talk?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I think I was exactly where everybody else is. It was still early in the morning. I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I was going from channel to channel. And the newscasters, who are always calm, very organized, really on top of it. Every station, there were people that were so brokenhearted, upset, and confused that I picked up on their panicking. And I think I was more, because I wasn't involved in what was actually going on, but I was getting it secondhand. And all of the addition of their panic, all I could do was cry. I was scared and frustrated and felt that many people were losing their lives over what? And I think that's what a lot of people felt, was confused. All you could do is just pray that those people who were really being affected could find a way to safety. But it went on, it kept going on. when they hit the Pentagon, it felt like it was never going to end. That we were just going to be, the whole East Coast was going to be bombed into annihilation there for a while.
Yeah, and I was so glad that my mom had passed away a couple months before that happened, because she would have been so upset.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. It felt like it was endless, like it was not going to end. Yeah. As one event layered on top of the other.
And then when they started interviewing, that was so scary when they started interviewing people immediately, and none of them knew what had happened to their loved ones. You know, they'd say, well, my husband left for work and I haven't heard from him. And just that unknowingness was so difficult to handle, because I think we can, as human beings, we can handle anything, but when it's unknown, it's just so wrenching for us.
Absolutely right. That's one of the things that we are geared towards. When we can have something known and complete, it actually helps us to begin to do the healing we need to do to adjust to the loss. But when we don't know and we don't have any proof, it makes it very difficult to even believe or even comprehend.
I was lucky to be one of those that went over to Mary's house. We were living in Santa Clara at the time. And to show up to a group of people that were giving reality to what had been fantasy so far, and discussing in a calm way what was going on. And I think we really needed that gathering, and for Mary and Tom to know intuitively or spiritually that their community needed help was amazing.
It truly was amazing, Mary. And I have to say that, well, no, it was Tom and Mary. No, it was true. Mary, I'm not hearing, I'm hearing about every other word you're saying.
Oh, I guess I better move in.
Oh, there you are. Now, yes.
Okay. I was hoping, is there anyone who would like to share with us, Chris, that we haven't heard from you?
Yeah, I have my hand up.
We didn't want, huh?
Chris had her hand up. Chris has her hand up. So Chris, go ahead.
You know, it's off there in the distance. Yeah, this is just adding to what everybody else is saying, because all of that is true as well. And just like when, you know, Kennedy was assassinated, I remember exactly where I was, etc. And we had arrived in Tahoe for a week vacation Sunday night, and Monday we'd gone off and done what we did, and then Tuesday we got up for a regular day. That's not what happened. And I think we stayed glued in front of the TV for, I don't know if it was all day. I don't remember. The days kind of melted into one another, but I do remember getting in the car, maybe it was the next day, and driving around the lake looking for places to give blood. And the firemen in their regalia were out on the highway with the boots. And so it makes me cry to think about it. And we would drive, you know, purposely look for them and drive up and put money in the boot. Yeah. We had to do something.
Yeah.
We had to do something. But I wanted to add a couple of things. What I remember was that KQED, which is the public TV, somebody in their producer's room said, we've got to show the news. And somebody overrode that and said, no. Now, this is good stuff, but it's just real emotional.
Yeah.
We're the only station playing kids stuff. So we're going to continue to play the kids shows. We're going to continue to play, whatever it was, Sesame Street or whatever their lineup was. And they committed until 5 o'clock to continue to put the children's programs per the schedule.
Yeah.
And I thought that was right on so many levels. There was so many, so much about that that was the right thing to do, and offers such a template for stalwart commitment to a higher ideal. And what I wanted to say, the piece that may not be being said here, or one piece that may not be being said, is 9/11 raised for me issues, conflicting issues. One, my anger about colonialism and the 20th century version of colonialism. And you may remember that thing about George Bush and broccoli. If Saudi Arabia's major export was or Qatar's major export was broccoli, we wouldn't have gone in. And so the entitlement, and the colonialism is really hard for me. But
absolutely,
there's also the flip side, which is there was, I don't know that it was nationalism, but more about, as a person whose boundaries have been violated by others, you don't get to do that here. And to think that we have, we are a nation that by and large has never been conquered and that has never been invaded. I mean, it has, but not to the degree that others have. And we sit over here and watch what happens over there. And oftentimes we're pulling the puppet strings. And then we get affronted when somebody reacts. And so, not to say that I'm not patriotic. I think there's an aspect of being particularly patriotic to be able to say certain things. So what I do remember, I think this was Clinton before that, I believe, but what happened, maybe this was 96, but Clinton brought in a Republican Secretary of the Defense. And I actually thought that was a good thing. If you have too many people thinking the same way, how are you going to be able to right the ship if it needs righting? And so there's an aspect for me of, it's not so much political as it is, how do you entertain all sides of the coin? And how, first of all, as an individual, how can you possibly grasp all sides of the coin? And then as a community, how can you unite when there are so many sides of that coin? And I'm very privileged to live in a place where I don't have to deal with that very much, because many people around me think the same way I do, and it's very convenient and very comfortable. And then I'm shocked. Then I get shocked. Wait a minute, you don't believe the same way I do? What do you mean would I sign that petition over there? And so there's a lot of comfortably numb. Mm-hmm. So I guess my practice is to try to hear, to try to understand, to put my feet in their shoes a little bit. And I would not, I would not win the same award that other people are winning for patriotism, but maybe it's a different kind. Maybe it's a global patriotism as opposed to a nationalistic one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And Bea, I notice you have your hand up, my dear.
Yes, but I will keep my comments very brief. I did want to acknowledge Tom and Mary, because that was a big piece of that day, to be able to go to a spiritual community and go, kind of start looking at processing our grief and our shock and disbelief. And it was great to have a place to be going there. And one of the things that I remember was Clyde sharing, someone that's usually quite quiet, sharing that his sense was that the people that were involved in the actual hijacking and the actual suicide bombers, that they would be now crossing over in somewhat of a shock themselves, that maybe this wasn't the right thing to do, or this was a different, they were also in disbelief, and seeing the same others crossing over with them were that people that they were bombed. And so that the thinking, I guess, prior to that would be that they would be doing God's work by doing this bombing, and they would be going one place and everyone else would be going somewhere else. And that his vision was that everybody was there were a lot of different people going to another plane, and they were not segregated or separated. So I don't know why I remember that specifically, but I thought that was a compelling comment. And another thing I remember is, I had young children that had to go to school, and I was watching the new, and I was working. I had my own business. I think I'd probably been up my usual 3 a.m. till 5 a.m. and worked and gone back to bed. And Peter woke me at about 7 and said, they bombed one of the Twin Towers just got hit. And I didn't understand what he meant. And so we had to get the kids to school. And all day I was thinking, what can I tell my kids about this? And not in a hateful way, right? So it was an interesting discussion when the kids got home, and it was good again, Tom and Mary, to be in that setting and then try to talk to the kids about 9/11. So I haven't talked to them now as adults, this weekend, because I was watching. There's a very good Netflix documentary on it that brought back a lot of the history and how we got there and how much of a part we've played in this from day one with Osama bin Laden. It's a great documentary, and I would hope I could have some good discussions with the kids about it. But those were the key things I remembered about that day.
Wow, that's amazing. And I remember Clyde saying that. And I think he said it also at a later time, because I didn't come till the very end, and I just dropped by because while Tom and Mary were having their wonderful thing, our entire critical incident stress management team came together to figure out how we were going to triage this event, how we were going to respond to it.
Right.
So we had an emergency meeting that day, and I remember peeking in at the very last minute, and but what you did was you helped us hold the energy, as I know all of you at Tom and Mary's were helping us hold the energy. So I'll never forget that. And I was actually teaching a class on critical incident stress management. And so I had firefighters, police officers, paramedics, and dispatchers from all over the state of California who had come up to the mansion, where we used to have our Center for Living with Dying programs, and they were coming to a class. And it was supposed to be a 2-day class on Tuesday and on Wednesday. And I got the call right before our Tuesday class started, and about half of our class had to leave and go back to their police departments and to their fire departments. They could not stay for the class. And it was very, very powerful.
It was interesting on the paper from firemen who, they sent military planes in to pick up teams from each fire department. Each group put together a team that would go east. And they talked about all sitting in the plane. They knew their own people, of course, but they might not even know some of the other people from other cities, local cities. And they said every single one of them has a respiratory problem now. And they said they did it again. They knew that's what they did. It had to be done, and they did it. Thank you, Bea. That was
yes.
Thank you, Tom and Mary, for providing a space for us and then helping us help others. That's always the key, right? We have to help ourselves first, in a sense, like on the airplane when we put on the mask before our children, and then we can help others. So thank you.
Beautiful.
Okay, Jen, do you want to close with your story? You had quite a story on, I don't think we've left anybody out who wants to speak.
Yes, and if anyone chooses to speak while I'm speaking, just raise your hand and we'll get right to you. So what happened as a result of that is immediately, as Mary was saying, urban search and rescue teams were being immediately deployed, from the West Coast, from the Midwest to the East Coast, and attending all of the 3 sites of the trauma that happened at 9/11. So, of course, in New York City, but also in the Pentagon, and then also with Flight 93. And what we found is that as many of these urban search and rescue teams were going, that there was nothing really being done for the responders. And so our team ended up sending several people a week afterwards. We got a special dispensation to send a bunch of folks that were responders on our team to go over to New York City and actually work with New York PD, New York City PD, NYPD, the Port Authority, dispatchers that worked that incident, and then firefighters where we could find them. And I find it very powerfully interesting. We wanted to do something that helped. And as Chris was talking about the firefighter boot, that became a symbol, you know, that even went beyond firefighters. It became a symbol of our responders and how we needed to support the responders. And I had the same reaction that you did, Chris, you know, seeing the firefighter boot wherever we went, on the West Coast, on the East Coast, and seeing this outpouring of incredible support and love and compassion and financial support from the people in our different communities, and to witness the selfless act of caring. I was also asked to be on KNTV, and I'll never forget this. They said, Janet, come on and talk to the community about how we take care of ourselves in crisis. And I'm going, holy moly, this is the biggest crisis I've ever been in. And I was on with a Muslim man who was an amazing gentleman. And I actually chose to wear a scarf, a headscarf, in honor of our Muslim women, folks that wear the headscarf, and in honor of them, because what was happening almost immediately after the events of 9/11, that very next week, what were we seeing? Hate crimes against Muslim people, especially those that could be easily identified, you know, in a visual way. And so we talked about the need for us to come together. And it was one of the most powerful news broadcasts I've ever been a part of. And I can remember there was one point where I said, we are here to support you. And I put my hand out. And in the Muslim tradition, it's not always, you know, kosher for a man to touch an unknown woman's hand. I mean, that's not always, I mean, it depends on where you are on that spectrum, but it's not always something that you would automatically do. I put my hand out, and he put his hand over mine, and he said, together, we will do this. We will heal our community. It was powerful. And the newscaster was even crying. She was in the middle of us. So she was between me and him. And when we went again in later, a couple of months later to 9/11, to New York City, and then we were also able to go to the Pentagon, what we found is that people were still in an amazing amount of shock, and they didn't know what they needed. And so what our team did was gently gathered people together. One of the people on our team was the president of Training for Safety and Public Safety Training Consultants, and he started a program called 911 Cares, and he did a special event for dispatchers who had responded to the calls and to the radio traffic on that day. And he said, we're going to have an honoring ceremony for the dispatchers because they had not gotten much acknowledgement or much press. And so we sent out invitations to One Police Plaza, which is the big hub where dispatchers are in New York City, and we gathered everybody together, and we just put a little note in each of their boxes and said, we're having a free cocktail hour and honoring of you, and we're just coming from the land of fruits and nuts. I remember this, from the land of fruits and nuts from California, because a lot of New Yorkers think Californians are a little bit a little bit strange. And so they love that. They love that. And I said, we're just here to be your backup singers. And that's kind of where I got my phrase backup singers. It actually came from 9/11, because I said that's what we can do. We can be their backup singers and support them as they journey through the healing of transmutation and the healing of bringing in the new normal and making meaning out of this incredible tragedy. And we had many dispatchers who said, I was the last person to speak to that person in the tower, and they gave me messages to send to their family members because they knew they were going to die. And so those dispatchers were often the message carriers of, the last words or the last thoughts of the loved ones. And they were still, 2 and 3 months later, they were still giving the loved ones those messages. So there was so much healing that happened. There was so much powerful spiritual energy that happened in response to this. And there was so much caring that happened. And I just want you to know that when we started, and again, Tom and Mary started the 11th meditation. So we would meet on the 11th of every month. And we did that for many, many years. And then our wonderful April and wonderful Chris took it over, and we said we're going to make it on Monday rather than trying to account for the 11th of each month. But the power of those meditations, my friends, is they gave our wonderful firefighters, especially back east, who we had connected with, a special, just a special thought. And we would say, we're just the spiritual prayer group sending you energy. And we even sent them, thanks to Mary's brilliance, we sent them a package on every 9/11. And we did that for probably 5 or 6 years, and we did it on the 10th year anniversary to Squad 288. Squad 288. And they're a special crash and burn squad, which we call a hazmat station at Fire Department New York. And they particularly took a big hit on their deaths after 9/11. And they used to say to us, we have a hard time getting See's candy here in New York. So Mary had the brilliant idea of sending them a huge box of See's candies. And they were forever grateful. It was just a small act of kindness. Yeah. Anybody else? I can't tell you how grateful, though, I am and was at that time to be a part of such a powerful spiritual community that allowed that to happen. And it gave me an action step, which helped my guilt, my sadness, my feeling of being overwhelmed, to be able to do these small things. It was incredible. So to transmute that energy of trauma and violence and turn it into energy of outreach. And our theme became Hands Across the Land. Do you remember, Mary? Hands Across the Land. So that's what we called our efforts to connect the East Coast and the West Coast.
Somebody said the worst of worlds and the best of worlds. I left over American flag shirt that they get out of. Remember that we all wore them for a long time.
Absolutely.
Can't hear you.
Mary, can you say again?
about the shirts, or are we going to talk about? Are we moving on now?
Oh, no, they couldn't hear you, Mary. So they're asking you to repeat what you said.
Oh, I said that probably half the people on the call have tucked away in a drawer somewhere a red, white, shirt with a flag on it. Remember, there was a time when we all wore them for a number of reasons, and pins that people made for each other that were made like a flag, and I still have a few. We probably want to move on though. Janet, what do you think? I think everybody. Oh,
Absolutely. Tiffany has something to share. Tiffany, please.
Yeah, I got knocked off the call for our internet. Sorry about that. But I wanted to, since you were talking about how the West Coast was helping the East Coast, we were stationed at Beale Air Force Base when 9/11 hit. Wow. And I was a daycare provider, and we had a lot of our parents, not my particular parents, but my children's parents, that were going to be sent over. And all of the daycare providers got together, and all of the children drew pictures and wrote cards to all of the workers, and we put them all together and sent them off to all of the responders and to the Red Cross so that they can send them out over there. So we got together as daycare providers because we were the people that were taking care of the children that got deployed over to go there and help. So we saw firsthand that the trauma on this side of parents having to leave to go, like you voluntarily went as an adult to go help over there, but they were emergency deployed. I remember one parent coming at what it happened at 9:09 in the morning East Coast time, so it was 6:09, and Austin's mom came in hysterical in front of me, and she was like, they were both in the medical field, and they said, if we both get deployed, can you take Austin? We don't have any family. Of course I'm going to take your kid. I'm his daycare provider. But there was lots of panic like that on our base. And it was that across all military bases. So it was wonderful. They were just probably extremely blessed to have people like you to go there and support them, not only physically, but energetically from the West Coast. So to hear all of your stories, I'm very grateful to know that they weren't alone during that time. Obviously, we knew that from other stories, but to also know that it hit close to home, that I know all of you, is pretty special.
Wonderful. Chris, did you have something, Christopher?
Yes, I wanted to comment. That 20 years later, I don't think that there's any less need for the support services that you have been providing. I do know people in this area that had to be deployed to reestablish the stock market, the fiber optics that were destroyed in the bottom of the towers. They had to pull the cables up and run them into a semi-trailer and connect so we could continue to have a stock market trading. And that there is endless stories and professions of people that were in the support that rose to the occasion, did what needed to be done. Mm-hmm. And whether it's a negative paternalistic stereotype to do what needs to be done, where there's people who step up and do what needs to be done and push their feelings and emotions aside to accomplish the required task completions, who are, have not done this. My father did not talk about his times in World War II. It's very common that people suppress and have residual traumas that could be soothe somewhat with the assistance. And it's not just the firefighters, the first responders that were on hand, the military, the deployments that went on, the many deployments that went on, and all the branches, whether it was the intelligence, etc. There's a huge amount of support that it could be beneficial even to this day from this event. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mary, let's go on to our next wonderful slide. And Mary and I came up with this. So, Mary, take it away.
What you got, what you need to put it in slide. And she got that because she was going to somebody and was going to get some help from them to things she was doing. And the guy said to her, what you got and what you need. Tell me what you got. Tell me what you need. We'll make it work. And so we both had to learn to that because it's so clean, so clear. You know, take a look at what you got, identify what you need, and then people don't have to bumble around sending you prom dresses. I remember one time I was at the Red Cross afterwards, disaster, and somebody brought in their taffeta prom dress, and oh, it was a nice thought. I wasn't quite sure who was going to be dressing. But the goal is to look ahead of time. Pay attention. What have you got? What do you need?
Absolutely. And you know, the power of that is it makes it so simple. And the power of that is that it enables us to be able to focus on what's happening right now.
Another strategy that's used often in business that I think translates to when a major event happens. I'm not just talking about something like 9/11, but in your personal life. You have to make some decisions about how you're going to respond to it. But you're under a certain amount of pressure then to do that. And the model that we use that works very well is that most of the time the decisions are based around how much time do you have to get it done, how much money or resources are you going to use, and what kind of individual resources, how many people do you have. So can you buy your way out of this problem? Do you have time to figure it out and do it slowly? Do you have a number of people that you can press in? Most frequently, in business, people that can press in. They have money and they have some time, but usually not a quick it's rarely this triangle. Triangle. Rarely like this in life. Usually one of the legs of the triangle is short. So they don't have much time or enough resources, and one of them is longer. They do have people they can resolve the problem. So offer this as a model, not that you exactly, but when you're looking, planning for how you're going to respond, and we're going to talk about that more, what kind of responses can you prepare ahead of time so that you don't get seen and taken off track by the energies of different. And so this is just a handy, simple little model. As okay, we had the earthquake. Let's step back and say, what do we have to do to come out of this? What do I have to do personally? Do I need to get somebody over to help me move the stuff around that fell? Do I need to report this stuff in a certain period of time? How much money do we have to have? Drive till come back up online. Just a handy model that allows you to function with some stress that you can use while you come back up to your own strength.
Mary, I'm hearing about every other word. That last part, I think it's very important. Can you repeat? I'm sorry.
Right,
is anyone else having trouble? Maybe it's just me. Is anyone else having trouble? Okay, other people are saying that they're...
Let me see if I can... I knew if I touched it. Okay, let me see if I can turn the microphone up, I guess.
That sounds good. Now can we see your beautiful
sounds
face?
clear now. It was garbled. It was choppy.
Okay, let me see now. Now you probably want to see me, not my shirt, but. Okay, let's run it by, let me give you the abbreviated form. What this triangle is, equilateral triangle. Most life is not equilateral. What we do in business, and I think it translated effectively for us in our personal choices, a problem arises. That's in the middle of this triangle. Oh my God, what am I going to do? If it's a small problem, but if it's a big, suppose we have the big earthquake. You know, they've had them in Mexico, they've had them in other places where the fault lines are moving a little. Suppose we have the big earthquake in Northern California. Then you were going to be on your own for a period of time. And you need to have a plan, have thought out ahead of time what resources do you have mobilized in order to survive comfortably, reasonably comfortably. And so the things you have to measure are how much time will you have to manage around it, how much money will you have to have? We have a little, don't tell the 300 people we mobilize. How many people can come and help you? Our family is quite small, and are diffused somewhat. So we're kind of on our own. So you have to figure out what is going to be. I'm simply using an earthquake as a model to look around. What happens in an earthquake is that you know, a lot of people have generators. We happen to have a solar generator. So it can happen in the summer, we're all right, but otherwise, problem. You having trouble hearing me again?
We're having trouble hearing again, but you were good for a while. Maybe if you just move forward a little.
Okay, is this better? Better?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens then is if you have gas generating machines to give you some electricity, that they don't usually have to have 5 gallons a day, and usually you only have 10 to 15 gallons in a can that you get from the gas station. So you have to have planned how you're going to respond to that. And the fact is that you're going to be unable to pump gas. You have to go in after the power's down. They're the kind of things that we don't think about ahead of time, but if you sit down and make a little plan ahead of time, then you have some options that you can operate with. And if you have, like, you know, everybody says they're going to come to our house if we have 1,000 Band-Aids and 23 cans of soup, you know, so those kind of things are taken care of. But once they're done, they're done. And then you have some cushion, some protection from the things that can happen. That's the value of looking at it from a triangle, is to say, how would I respond? What do I have that will allow me to get through a critical time in local crisis? Is that good enough, Jen? Can we?
Yes. Beautiful. Did everyone hear that? Because I think this is very important. Once we build our physical survival triangle, you know, what you got, what you need, and we prepare for that ahead of time, it makes it much easier than to deal with the other dimensions as we're going through transmutation.
Yeah. Now you're back up, Jenny.
Okay. So we often talk about in crisis, in any way, that one of the big things that happens to us emotionally, mentally, and physically, as well as spiritually, is that we can be thrown from out of control. We call it OOC. So we're out of control. And it's very scary. And it can leave us feeling rudderless and leave us feeling, you know, at our wits' end. And we are also could be in isolation depending upon if we have, say, a major earthquake. We might not be able to get to our family members, our friends, even our neighbors, depending on what the disaster is. So the big thing about tending and befriending is that we can get from out of control to in control and get out of isolation to community. And tending and befriending is actually a term that was developed by Dr. Kelly McGonigal, who wrote an amazing book called The Upside of Stress. And in that book, she talks about, she's a scientist out of Stanford, and she talks about the power of doing things together, of tending and befriending each other. And what happens is it actually raises the oxytocin level in our physiological, biochemical system when we are able to tend and befriend. And so if we can do that on a physical way, as Mary talked about her triangle, we can also do that in an emotional, mental, and spiritual way. And I believe, Chris, you had your hand up, Christopher?
Yes, I wanted to mention that there is local groups that you can join into to be prepared for emergency operations, whether it is, there's local community CERT programs, community emergency response teams, they call it CERT for short, which supplement the police and fire departments in emergencies when those resources are overtaxed. It's basic things, how to shut off your own gas lines and electricity, how to help your neighbors, things like that, including the Band-Aids, along with the preparation supplies, what you should have in your trunk of your car for earthquake preparedness, fire, etc. Red Cross, and those also, and there's even online the FEMA as a weekly preparation things that deal with fires, and they're based off the East Coast, but they try to address what we go through with the fires. And it does help to break up the isolation. It tends to build the contacts with the community. It helps with the OCC, the out of control things, because people have more ideas of what to do. Even if it's not everything, it gives them simple steps that they can take in order to help themselves and help their neighbors until help from the responders comes to do it. It ties in with attending and befriending, maybe not the spiritual aspects of it, like we're supposed to be addressing ourselves, we're filling that gap, but it does talk to the others about the preparation and being in communication, knowing who these people are. Thank you.
And I would add, Christopher, I think you're right on the money on this one, because I was just speaking last night. I was a guest presenter at a CERT team in Sunnyvale. And actually, the CERT team, just by gathering together, preparing for disasters, is already beginning the emotional and the spiritual tending and befriending.
Absolutely.
And so I, absolutely. So it's so powerful, my friends, I think, when we can acknowledge that. So this was an amazing quote that, for those of you that know, I've worked at the Center for Living with Dying for 45 years. And on our first stationery, on our very first stationery at the center, was this quote by James Baldwin. "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Mary, take it away.
Oh, okay. Well, I just was touching my heart because it was such a meaningful statement that says we can't pretend that bad things aren't going to happen to us. Bad things happen to everybody. And when all is said and done, we die. I mean, I wish there was another out, but it's not. You know, so we have to, I think, nobody has to, but I think we're best served if we try and plan ahead, understand that terrible things might be happening, but that it doesn't mean it's end all or end or be of all or be of all. And if we can create impact that we can intersect with, you can see Janet did this wonderful slide where we exist, we are ourselves. We have family and friends that intersect with us, that sustain us or drain us, depending on their style. We have a community in this area of California. I think we're very lucky to be. And many of us have work that gives us resources to understand go forward.
Absolutely, because this actually creates. So if we take a look at all of these, then that, as Mary said, makes up the world. And we truly, we're impacted on all those dimensions, and we have the ability to respond on all of those dimensions. And we've actually demonstrated that by our sharing of what we've done, in the aftermath of 9/11, or how we've responded to 9/11. And so this is it. How do we respond? And Mary, this was so beautiful. It came right from Mary. So this is an amazing.
Well, one of the things that happens to all of us in varying degrees and varying circumstances, and that most people are vulnerable, however, to being overwhelmed by a sense of urgency. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And you want to take reasonable action steps, and you don't want to leap out and race to the end of the cliff until you know quite what you're going to do. Because if you don't do that, if you haven't planned ahead, identified some action steps that are very simple, just really kind of turning into an earthquake preparedness class. It wasn't our intent, but can take and transmute those experiences to any kind of an emergency. The reality is, you pretty much know what's going to happen to you, and then there's a certain element of things that you don't know. But you can imagine whatever happened to you. But they happen. Then you say, well, what do I do if I'm incapacitated? What do I do if, and you think about that a little ahead so that you have one or two action steps. You don't have to take 1,000 action steps. You have to say how, and we always say, know how to get a hold of people when the normal connections are not available, because you can't do it alone. And so that means you have to plan ahead, and of course, everybody talks about the go bag. Go bag, the go bag. You're supposed to have that go bag ready so that you can go. And it's always been a little frustrating and annoying to me until I kind of figured out that what I do is I take one of the bags that I always take when I go on a little vacation, for certain things that I have in it, and now I just keep it flat. And if I use those things on vacation, when I come home, I sort through it and repack it and reload it, but it's not as annoying. I mean, it has backup medicine and that kind of stuff. The bag for my next trip. It's positive, as opposed to just a go bag that the trees outside your house are sparking and a rubber bag. So I think anything that we can do to partially prepare gives us the ability to function at such a much higher level and be there for others. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where what's in our backpack can actually become our toolbox. And what we mean by that is what we have learned, in terms of what has worked for us in the past or what maybe has not worked for us in the past, will then help us to not only build our physical and survival and safety backpack, go bag, but it also, we can develop our emotional and mental and spiritual toolbox that will become our go bag. on that level. And so what's worked for us in the past, or maybe what has not worked for us in the past, will really serve us in being able to inform how and what we're going to do in the future. Christopher, you had your hand raised?
Yes, what Mary was talking about and what you just said. One thing about it, sports teams, they practice repetitive things so they know what to do when a line drive comes directly at them, etc. What on a spiritual level, what we can do to assist, what you do on a daily basis, Janet, is what we as a church could be doing, practicing by doing these exercises. When the unexpected happens, you know what your options are, how you can respond, and it becomes a habit rather than a shock, OCC, out of control situation. That's what the certs do. What I wanted to mention also was the scouts, and I think that we should be having our own spiritual scouting thing through our scholarships, our mentorship, etc. As a church is a valuable area, a gap that needs to be filled. And it is really repetitive practicing. That's what the firefighters do. That's what the police do. They train. And if we do it on a regular basis, we'll be better prepared. And thank you so much for an excellent presentation.
Wonderful. So now we're going to go into how do we prepare our spiritual go bag? Okay? How do we prepare our spiritual go bag? Well, this is one way that we can do it, is we've identified on our critical incident stress team 4 steps. Acknowledge it, express it, do an action step, and then reconnect to what is still good. So, Mary, are we ready to have them help develop their own spiritual and emotional?
Well, we take a look at the time. So we talked about giving people a couple of minutes to prepare them off and stuff.
Yes.
Already 30.
Wow, time has flown, hasn't it? Yes, it is 7:30. So, would you like to go in breakout rooms, or would you? Do you think we should just maybe just continue to do this together? What do you think, Mary?
Well, I don't know what people think, but I think it might be harder to break out than to do it together.
And go together.
Let's do it together. So, what do we need in our emotional and spiritual go bag? What do you need? What do you think are the qualities or the tools that we want to put in that toolbox? Let's just brainstorm and brain share, as we say. I love the word brain share because we're kind of just downloading with each other. What do you need?
Janet's phone number.
I like that.
Well, I thought of that too, because we talk about reach out to each other, but everyone's very busy. And how do we reach a person? Maybe if we had a list of those of us that want to be reached out to, then we also can reach out to one another. Like
in the Loma Prieta earthquake, the phone lines went down because the damage, and there was a lack of communication. So alternatives of handheld radio, they call them walkie-talkies, and designated points of contacts is excellent idea, Lynn.
I was thinking also maybe not just during an earthquake, but also when people feel overwhelmed by the multiple stressors right now, even if you are a light worker and you are giving out, and if we're supporting each other in community, where can we go? I mean, somebody, I don't know the work schedules of people, I don't want to intrude, but sometimes we do need to reach out or be reached out to. So where can we find that?
That's a good question. I don't want to just give a quick, thoughtless answer. Do we need to have an outcome from this? Sending a note out to people that were out in the class saying, do you have some availability? what kind of support might you need individually? I'm trying to take notes so that we can talk about.
Well, for example, I could say I'm a good person to reach on by phone, but I'd also like to know how you would want to be reached if I needed to reach out to you best. And do we want to reach out or have people reach us? In my case, both. I would like people to reach me, and I'd like to be able to reach others at moments. And what would be our best way to be contacted?
So that's going back. That's going back to our concept, Mary. What you got, what you need.
I just think that it's going to be hard as long as we're doing virtual reality and internet stuff. I mean, we got to get out of this situation. Until we do, we're just on our own.
Well, good point, Eric. But I do think that in times of emergency, we're going to have to prioritize taking care of one another over social distancing priorities in order to accomplish what needs to be done.
It sounds like there are two areas. One would be in resources in an emergency, and the other one is for people who are giving out to know when you're overwhelmed how you can tune in. And we, those of us who don't mind being called, or we'd rather be emailed, and when we can be called or emailed, that would be kind of nice to have.
And I would also offer that in addition to this, Mary and I really had the goal of you building your own internal toolbox, right?
Okay.
Your own internal toolbox as well. So that tending and befriending, absolutely. How can we tend and befriend ourselves? What are some of the tools we can put in our toolbox should we not be able to contact anybody by phone or email? What are some of those tools we'd like to put in there?
That's Kleenex.
A prayer?
Absolutely.
What did you say, Mary?
A box of Kleenex, she said.
Prayer, box of Kleenex, soothing and uplifting activities we can turn to. I know for me, what's helped me a lot are creative pursuits. I wouldn't be talking to you now if I didn't have something to do here.
I would put in my essential oils of calming oils like lavender, lavender and antiseptic essential oils. And also the ones that deter insects, those type of things.
Could you ever share a list of the things that work for you? I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Is ministers the holy water for doing last rites, etc.?
Yes. Absolutely. And it's good to have a little kit. I have like a little kit that's got holy water, holy oil. I have some incense, and I also have some sage. It's kind of like my little go bag, my spiritual go bag. And I have some essential oils also, Ms. Donna. And so absolutely having those available to us so that if we're called to do that work, we can have it at the ready. It can be in our spiritual go bag.
That's good.
What else, my friends? I think you have some wonderful ideas.
Connection with animal friends. But are we talking about calming ourselves or calming others? Either one?
Actually, both. Both. Thank you, Miss Donna. Absolutely. We're talking about both. And I've got to let you know, in the recent VTA shooting events and the aftermath of that, we have used comfort animals a great deal. We've used comfort dogs, and also there are comfort horses.
Oh.
Yeah, that we have used with the VTA survivors.
Oh. So the word comfort really comes up. Those things that are comforting for ourselves and others. And to help with the hand.
Beautiful.
think that especially in the beginning days after an incident, the comfort can be very, very simple. Sometimes comfort is just giving somebody an extra blanket or something soft to hold on to. Sometimes it's just putting your hand on somebody's shoulder when you go by. Simple things we can do in early stages that are just say, hey, you're not alone. It's good.
And it's those very simple things that create comfort and create safety. I think you're really hitting on something here, Mary. Comfort and safety. And sometimes those physical things like a nice, warm, soft blanket, or even a teddy bear or a stuffed animal. You know, to pack that away, not only for young people, but for us as well as adults, to have those little, what we call comfort anchors.
I saw water come up, which is good, and protein bars. Simple things that won't expire. Or you put a date on your calendar that you pull them out and use them, and then you replace them. You know, so you're not going to don't get protein bars you don't like. Get protein bars you do like. And then when they're getting close to their expiration, you replace them.
And I love this one. Photos of loved ones and people or deities that inspire us. I love that, having that visual. Because when we are in crisis, we are often visual. We're very visual. So to have those photos of loved ones and people or deities that inspire us, that's wonderful.
Well, it's a wonderful strategy if you have children and you have pictures of people stand here and they go on, but you know, like you can talk about the kind of tough things they went through, and so people understand that there's a continuity, but we're all going to have tough things to go through, and it'll be okay. First aid kits. Thank you, Judy. That's a good one.
Excellent.
I'll make up I'll send it out for the. You hit the record button, right, Jen?
Yeah, the record button is on. Yes.
So we can do this together, maybe. Ah, good.
And you know what Eric was saying about exercise, stay as young and healthy as we can, being creative, remember awakening, remember youth, blankets. These are great.
Blankets is good. And these said a comfort book. You know,
Ooh.
everybody down, but it would be nice to know you had just the right book that you're going to get through this. Whatever it is, whatever special way, you'll know what one appeals to you. So to get a
Absolutely.
second put it right in that go bag.
Beautiful. And I have been given books over the years, like they'll sometimes have like Earth Prayers, which is a wonderful book, or Prayers for Seasons, or poetry books. You know, all of these might be amazingly helpful to just be able to pull out, you know, like just go to any page and pull out a short inspirational piece. Blankets help. You're absolutely right, Christopher. Blankets help with people in shock. It's amazing how blankets can be used to help people reconfigure themselves physically. Metaphysical books, absolutely. This is a wonderful list, Mary.
Don't erase it till I match my list with what we're picking up here.
Absolutely. It's so incredible. What else do you need? What else would you like in your spiritual, emotional go bag? And Judy brought up a very important point. When something like this happens, Your presence can be the gift. Your presence can be the present. Lynn says, friend's phone number. Eric, I totally agree. I can't go without ambient music. Got to have that. Chris Brown, patience, empathy, compassion, tolerance, faith, and hope.
Hello. Janet's
Sure.
frozen.
Am I frozen?
Not
Am I
anymore.
frozen?
Not
Oh, I
now.
did. Okay, great.
A ham radio. Good idea.
Connect to chakras, especially.
We have one of those crank radios, but if there's no power, we can crank it long enough to find out what's going on.
Yeah, it was a
Ham radio's better.
emergency radio.
Yeah. And Eric says to connect with chakras, especially our heart center. So to make sure the energy is flowing in all of our chakras and that every area is getting connected and getting rejuvenated. Crystals, wonderful. Crystals and stones and rocks, wonderful. I don't know about you, but I've gotten some wonderful ideas.
Good. Great. How lucky we were to have such a good energy club.
Hugging a tree sounds silly, but Alexi McKinnon had me do it when I was exposed to chemicals, and instead of going to the emergency room, I went out, hugged a tree, and buried a crystal in the dirt, which later developed a big red spot. So the earth, the connecting to the earth and the crystal really helped.
Absolutely. Hugging a tree is a wonderful way to get immediately grounded. Absolutely. Repeat this meeting.
I should hug my trees more often. Yeah.
That's right.
Me too.
Well, it depends on whether you're in an earthquake or not. You're shaking. But if you repeat the meeting to gather the best practices that everybody comes up with, I'm sure there'll be many more good suggestions to come together as people have time to think about this. Eric mentioned about exercising to be in shape. If we can incorporate into our exercises the things we need to practice to be ready for the emergencies, whether physical or spiritual, is might be a good time to incorporate the two together.
I think that's fantastic. And the key thing is when we practice ahead of time, is there water running somewhere?
Can someone mute their dishes? Oh, that would be me. Hang on, I'll figure it out.
And so, in a real way, one of the things that's so powerful is that as we practice these things, hugging a tree, gathering our crystals, our essential oils, practicing, hope and love and compassion and being present for each other. As we do this during this 360 grief that we're in already, we'll then continue as more things happen, we'll have that more practiced and more finely tuned in terms of what it is that we need. Because there are some, I see some regular themes, and like I believe that Judy has brought up twice ham radios. Ham radios are a great way to communicate, and I know also Christopher brought that out too. So this is raising our awareness of some of the things we might do.
can't just go buy a ham radio. You have to learn, you have to get connected to the, I mean, I mean, I think it's wonderful, but it has to be done ahead of time. You can't run down to
Exactly. That's right.
That's exactly right, which is one of the reasons it should be thought about in preparation for a major catastrophe, because it's the only communication that you will probably have with the outside world.
Well, the CERT courses, they include, you can order through the courses, the radios that are used by the CERT groups, which are sidebands to what the police and the firemen use. So you can stay in communications and you can contact other people at a more local level. It's not as long distance as a ham radio, but it is a much better local communication device, handheld, carry with you.
Exactly. And what Chris mentioned, which I think is powerful, is the wind-up radio. And Mary also referred to that earlier, the wind-up radio that you can get that can give you information. Wonderful.
So I think what we're going to do, we really are almost out of time here. And we have a list of books that Janet had recommended and looked through. And I think what I'll do is I'll add those to the things without.
Hello?
Absolutely. And we'll send out this PowerPoint for anybody that would like it.
That's a good idea. That was, we don't have to look at it.
And we just want to remember, when we're staying in contact and we're dealing with issues one moment at a time, to stay in the present moment and normalize that what we're going through is a natural reaction to many changes and stresses, and focus on what it is that's hitting us the hardest right now and what do we need right now to get through it.
And you almost have to go like, this is like a primal level. Breathe, water, move, get grounded in the moment, figure out what's the most difficult and what do I have to get through at a primal level. You can't think about, oh God, I love this in the house and now it's, that will break you.
Right.
Okay, wait, let me just figure out what I'm going to get these people fed with tonight. Somebody out there who can make spaghetti or 10 cans of, so that you have to start and hold to the simple for the first. And you'll have to deal at some point with the fact that the most beautiful picture you ever had was burned up or whatever. But don't start there. Start with the survival.
Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, remember our ancestors and everybody that is in our Heart Hotel. And for those of you that...
The native tribes that said, when trouble comes, you call on the ancestors and they have to come. They have to come and stand by you and help you. So call them in. Call them in.
Absolutely. And this is just something we developed on our team as a daily check-in, especially as we're going through these ongoing stressors. So what's going on with my body? Our body always tells us the truth. You know, what did I eat? Did I move today? Do I have any unfinished business from the day? You do this at the end of your day. What did I do just for me? Any dreams or daydreams? What's the most powerful right now? What do I need? And what is the message for me in the day? Just a real simple check-in to make sure that when you end your day, you've taken care of anything that you might need to take care of, and that you receive what the day has given you. You receive that message. And I know for me, it really helps me to get grounded, to pay attention, take 5 minutes and go through these questions. Very helpful. And what we want to leave on is gratitude. You know, what are we grateful for right now, this minute?
Put the list up again a little bit. Your daily log list for a minute again.
Oh, I'm sorry. And we will send you the PowerPoint if you want. Just send Corky. If I can ask you to do this, Corky, if we can have them send you their emails.
Can we just post it as a function of the video
Perfect.
on the UCM board?
Let's do that. That's a great idea, Chris. I wasn't quite sure how to do that. Great.
I'm not sure where to find it.
What'd you say, Mary? I didn't hear you, that last part.
It's posted on the UCM board?
Yes.
Ooh.
What's the UCM?
Somebody knows how to do it? Do you know how to do it? I don't know how to do it.
Is that on the
Corey can do it.
Is that something on the website, the UCM board?
Yes, the website. We're going to see if we can post it on the website.
Oh, okay.
Would that be helpful, Eric?
Yeah.
Perfect.
If I can remember the website.
It's u-c-m.org.
Or Universal Church of the Master, I think gets you there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We're in the process of upgrading the website. So
right.
It's in a process right now.
It's in a process, exactly.
Like the rest of us.
Everybody in writing. Pick up what Chris sent.
Gratitude.
So we're going to invite you, my friends, to take a nice deep breath and just get in touch with this moment in time. What are you most grateful for? What are we most grateful for? And I know that I'm most grateful, and we, Mary and I, are most grateful that you chose to take this time out to be with us and to be with each other, to explore these topics, and to really dive a little bit deeper into how we transmute what can be very painful to what can be very healing and what can give us meaning.
Well said, Janet. We're grateful for the presentation the two of you have offered.
And Mary, shall we give them homework? I think they need homework, don't you?
I hate homework, so you give it to them.
You give it to me, then I can hear it.
So this is our homework, my friends. Do something that has no socially redeeming value whatsoever, something that spoils you and something that gives you a great gift of just comfort and joy and delight. And do that for yourself before the night is over. It can be a little teeny tiny thing. It might be going out and hugging a tree. But give yourself a gift of something tonight for being willing to look through all of these topics and issues that we brought up and being together. And by the way, my friends, if you would like to make a donation to UCM, please feel free to do that. We love it and we thank you. And please spread the word that for our next October's meeting, it's going to be on Wednesday instead of Tuesday. We're going to have Tony Redhouse, who is an amazing Native American spiritual teacher and wisdom keeper. And he's going to be sharing about the cycles and circles of life.
Oh, very nice.
And that will be on Wednesday, not the second Tuesday, but the Wednesday after the second Tuesday.
That'll also be at 6 o'clock?
From 6 to 8 p.m. Yes.
Will we get, if we've attended now, will we get an email link? Or we need to go on the website for that?
I think we need to go on the website.
I went on Universal Church of the Master and found the link.
Perfect.
Okay.
What's the date on that?
Let me look. I've got to find my, let me find out for you.
I guess I
It is, I'll look for you right now. It is the
13th.
13th.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The 13th from 6 to 8 p.m.
But I'll be another day. I'll be another year older by then.
Oh,
Well,
your
happy birthday.
Yeah, I'm not so happy about that, but anyway.
Happy birthday.
Let us honor it.
If you can figure out a way around it, please share it with us.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mary.
And Chris Brown posted October 13th from 6 to 8 p.m.
That's right.
All right. I got a little.
That's what we just said.
Okay.
So remember your homework, do something wonderful for yourself, and we wish you a blessed night.
Okay, good.
And so to you. Good night.
Are you going to
Thank you, everybody.
Are you going to put on the reading list?
Oh, I'm sorry. There's the reading list. I apologize.
I'll send that out also.
Okay.
Because it's pretty comprehensive.
Okay. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.